Hello again. Hello again. Hopefully you can hear me. Some response to that would be nice. Yes, great. Can you see the screen? Okay. So hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us again and welcome to our second session of Bexel Manager Online Education. I'm Mileta Pejovic, BIM Manager at Bexel Consulting, and I'm with you again, teaching you our integrated BIM platform. If you have any questions, use the Q&A or chat to type it in. And at the end of the session, I'll try to respond to your questions. And for all of you who wasn't with us yesterday, this is another hour-long online session introducing you Bexel Manager, and every Tuesday and Wednesday at the same time for next four and a half weeks, I will demonstrate you BIM workflows using Bexel Manager in live demo. All session will be recorded as the same as the yesterday's, and will be sent to all of you participants. And also to remind you, all of you attendees can submit a request for a free trial license. And during this period of 4 up to 5 weeks, you'll be able to use it for free. At the beginning, a brief reminder. Yesterday, we talked about user interface, opening the project, exploring the main project options, working in the views using Building Explorer system-based breakdown, and assigning BIM elements to specific building or story. Today, the topic is demonstration of Bexel Manager custom BIM model breakdowns and intro to the properties or the model attributes. At the beginning, I saw a lot of questions yesterday regarding some reinforcement elements and similar things. So that's why I played a video at the beginning. So you saw quite large building, quite large project with a lot of reinforcement elements, which are imported from Ifc files. So I repeat, if you want to see your ray bars as a 3D BIM model elements, you have to use Ifc. Otherwise, if you're using BX3 files exported from the Revit, these gonna be, let's say, optimized in order to make the model much easier to work with. And today we have a lot of topics and issues to cover. So I'm just gonna briefly explain a lot of a previous question which we also got yesterday, and quite a lot of you asked regarding update of BIM model and how we can compare different versions of the project. So today I'm gonna start with that. And this is a brief agenda for the next webinars for the next weeks. So hopefully you can see the screen. This is the, let's say, one version of the project, and the project is created from the Ifc files. And now I'm gonna close this file. Also, some of you asked how we can get the colors from Ifc. Automatically, you're gonna get the colors from the source file. I'm gonna repeat, if you don't see the original colors from the source file, you can use the option to reset to source colors. So if you set your colors in your authoring tools, the colors of the materials will be used in the Bexel Manager. So you may see that some of these elements have a different colors automatically based on the preferences we made in the authoring tool. So now I'm gonna close this project and show you how you usually do the updates and compare the previous versions and the new versions of the project. As I've said, the best way to create and compare the project is using the option to create new project, not just drag and dropping it. So we can create new project by updating some of the previous projects. So in this case, I'm going to use this one and the update the project into my new version. And in this case, I'm going to select the Ifc file of the updated building. So once the update process is completed, or actually in the meantime, the software asks us how we want to update a project. So in this case, is the same building. So I'm just gonna choose that the source is the same and the building is also the same. But in this case, for example, if you want to compare all the building elements, whether these are the new ones or deleted ones, now I'm gonna select keep and add to selection set. So all the elements which are deleted in the new version will be also kept, and we can compare them with the new version or with the previous version. Yesterday, I showed you how you update the project with a new building, and it's quite similar workflow. So you're choosing just a different building. In this case, we want to show you how you can actually compare two versions of the same building, same project. So once it's updated, I'm gonna open the project. And also a lot of you asked why some of these images are showing you the images of the previously opened project. Let me just bring it back. And why some of these are without image. If you open your project just by drag and dropping, or you're just opening some project without saving it, every time Bexel Manager automatically saves the project. But if you don't use the option save, you won't be able to see the image. So when you save the project, then you're gonna get the actual image from the B model. So this is the updated project. And currently, all the updated elements, as I showed you yesterday, are automatically created in different versions of selection sets, showing you added elements, elements missing in source, which are actually deleted elements in the new version. And all these are elements with the change geometry or change properties. So something we can additionally do is we can colorize these elements quite easily. And this is something that I didn't mention yesterday, but these are the common used options, and these are covered in the tutorials, which you can also watch on our YouTube channel, and in our manual. Also, some of the additionally developed features and the tips and workflows are also gonna uploaded to the common shared um, place, so users can download all these materials with additional manuals, tutorials, and let's say some additional um, stuff we're going to share with you, such as some add-ins or some additional databases you can use for cost classification. So in this case, I'm going to just change the color of selected elements. In this case, for these added elements, for the green color, for example, elements which are deleted, I can change into, in this case, red. And all these elements which are changed, we can colorize, for example, in orange. And now you can easily track the differences between different versions of the project. So this is actually the latest project. This is the new project. This was the previous project, and these elements are changed elements. So you may see that these elements are only changed in order to follow the latest design. Previously, this was there. So I think it covers that question regarding comparison of different versions of the project. So now we're going to continue with today's topic, which is using additional options for breakdowns of your elements, and also intro to the properties or attributes of the Bexel Manager elements. As I said yesterday, the left side of this user interface as you currently see it, and this is something that I used to work with this kind of setting of my user interface. Sometimes I just put that selection info, for example, like this, so I can easily track selected elements within the currently open view. So all the left windows are used to explore your B-model elements, and the right part of the window is usually used to explore the properties of selected elements and all other information relevant to selected elements. So now uh, we yesterday explained how you can use this system-based breakdowns, which always automatically groups your B-model elements according to different types, according to different stories or different elevations, and of course, if you have multiple buildings by buildings, by systems, if you have your MEP elements, and also if you're using elements or projects which are exported from the Revit workset structure. Otherwise, if you export the Ifc files or Ifc coming from other platforms or other authoring tools such as Archicad, you can use selection set, automatically generated selection sets, which are selection set which provides you the information about the layers and classifications if you edit classifications in your information within the authoring tool. So this is something Bexel Manager automatically does every time when you open the project. But now, sometimes I'm gonna explain the additional way how you can customize that breakdown, because sometimes that way of segregation of your B model is not enough, or you want to make different kind of segregation according to your needs, for example. So in that case, you want to use available information or available properties to segregate your B-model elements in the way you like, or you can use some already, let's say, automatically generated segregation in order to filter your way of segregation. So let me just explain it on a real example. So if you want to use custom breakdowns, then you just have to use the custom breakdown tab within this left window, and we can use or create new custom breakdowns. All breakdowns which you create will be listed right here. So I'm gonna create new custom breakdown, and this is the window for creation of the custom breakdowns. The first line is for providing the name, and in this case, I'm just gonna segregate entire buildings or entire projects. So this is just the test segregation. So in this case, we can choose whether we want to segregate the selected elements. In this case, I just selected one element, and the segregation, whichever I do, won't be really presentable. But the other really important thing is the type, which actually allows you to select which kind of element or the types from the building you want to use for the segregation. So if you choose different type, not just by using selection, current selection, so using some types, you can choose what types of the B model elements you want to include in your segregation. So if you check the buildings, building 1 and 2, all building elements will be included in our new segregation system. The next way is just selecting specific stories. The next way is selecting the categories, available categories or the types from your B model elements. The families are the next, let's say, level of segregation. So you can choose just to include specific types or the families coming from your authoring tool in the segregation. And the next one is using selection set or the actually selected elements. In this case, I'm going to use buildings. So all the elements from my build model will be included in my new segregation way or new segregation method. Use option, use selection. And now you see all B model elements are included. And now in this right part of the window, we're gonna specify how we want to segregate the B model. So now I'm gonna just use some sample or simple segregation method similar as the one we have already. So in this case, I'm gonna segregate all B model elements also by buildings and also according to, let's say, just the families. So now we created two levels of segregation. This is our hierarchy of segregation, the first level and the second level. Additionally, when we use custom breakdown segregation, we can colorize our B model elements according to specific level of segregation. So in this case, we can colorize all our elements according to their type or the family. So if we want to do that, you just have to click to the set color coding rule. And in this case, the system will create new segregation based on the buildings and then based on the families. So if we hit OK, you see automatically created segregation, which is called test. So it's our custom breakdown, new custom breakdown called test, which organize all our B model elements based on the buildings and then based on the types. So this is another way how you can check if your B model elements are named according to some naming convention or according to some predefined BIM execution plan or similar thing. Also, the same way you can do in your elements, but in this case, you have to expand all these categories or the types up to the last level. So additional way how you can do it here is just segregating the elements based on the family or based on the name. And here you can track if your elements have specific, I don't know, naming convention or prefix or suffix to their name according to the naming convention. And of course, since we used colorizing the elements, this is where we can use different view for showing the B-model elements according to this way of colorization. So in this case, instead of using just 3D view, we're gonna use 3D color-coded view or orthographic color-coded view, whichever you prefer. In this case, I'm gonna use 3D color-coded view with perspective, and all these elements are automatically colorized according to their family or the types in this case. And this is quite convenient way how you can access all the B model elements according to this, and these are all quite quite nicely presented with the different colors. Of course, for each of these, you can always do the edit, and then you can specify the color for each of these colors which are automatically generated. And of course, you can do different kinds of segregation. So this one, which is already created, we can reset entire tree and, for example, add additional level of segregation according to, let's say, material. And then we can organize the structure of this segregation. So we can switch to organize entire B model according to the building and then by material and then at the end by the family. So if we do that, just hit OK and everything will be refreshed automatically. So entire building or entire B model is segregated according to the buildings and then according to the materials and then at the end according to different types. And this is just one simple way how you can use it. I'm gonna present you now some let's say a little bit advanced ways how you can do it, not just by using the simple already ways of segregation using the types or the family names, but using some of the properties or the information which these elements contain within itself. So for example, I can select any of these elements And again, within the properties window, you are able to see all information which are coming from the authoring tool. All these properties are added in the authoring tool and are presented in the Bexel manager. These properties can be filtered and adjusted. For example, I'm just gonna smaller this window so you can see when I hit the property option, you see the options and filters. So this is the way where you can specify which of the properties you want to see. In this way, all the properties are included, but sometimes if you're just interested in specific properties, you can use the filtering and then you can just see specific properties that are the point of your interest. So if I use this, for example, then you're gonna see only these properties related to the stories. In this case, I'm gonna turn on all the properties, or additionally, you can use the filtering options. So for each type of the elements, you can specify which group of the properties you want to see. So this is another way how you can use it and how you can filter just specific types of the properties. So for this selected element, we see that all these elements, let me just bring it back to turn off filtering. Okay, see all properties. So all these elements have already input information about the uniformat or master format code. So we can use this information to segregate the elements automatically according to this property or any property available. So if we want to do that, I'm going to create new custom breakdown. In this case, I'm going to call this one uniformat. And again, we want to include, in this case, I'm going to include only one building. So you can see the difference when you use specific selection from the left window. So in this case, I'm going to select only one building, building one, to be segregated, all elements from the building one to be segregated according to not just basic available segregation methods based on the building level, category, family, but using some of the properties. So in this case, I'm going to use discrete property. The next time, I'm going to use the continuous property. Sometimes our user asks, what's the difference? So discrete property is actually used for segregating the elements, or these properties are usually textual properties. And continuous property are numerical or other types of the properties which can be used. So if you use some textual properties which are added in the authoring tool, you can use discrete properties, otherwise you can use continuous property. So in this case, I'm gonna use discrete property, which is uniformat code. And right here in this window, the system actually lists all available properties from the B model, and we can filter which property we want to use for segregation. So in this case, I'm gonna use uniformat code and hit OK. And additionally, we can colorize the element according to uniformat code. And I'm gonna hit OK now. So the system automatically creates new uniformat custom breakdown, and all the elements are colorized, which are included in this custom breakdown. So it's elements from the building one. We can turn on the visibility of all these elements. And now you see only elements from this building are included. The other building is not included in our custom breakdown. And also we can use it to filter and show only elements with specific uniformat code. If I select any of these elements within the properties, we can check if it's working, and of course it does. So it's the same uniformat because it's using the same information. Additionally, we can edit this kind of segregation and organize or structurize these elements additionally according to, for example, building levels. Or now we can use another building and include it as well. So in this case, all the buildings will be included. So we're gonna segregate them according to the building level and then according to the property uniformat, generate, and then hit OK. And now you see all the buildings are included. Let me just show it. All the buildings are now included. And now we have the segregation according to the stories and then according to the uniformat codes. And also this is something that can be used for the brief model checking. So if you see that some of these segregated elements or segregating information presenting undefined value, it means that these elements do not have the property or do not have the value for uniformat code. So this is another way how you can check if all your B model elements have specific properties which are required according to the BIM execution plan or the client requirements. And also something that our users usually asks, how we can use or structurize the same, let's say, code or the property in a different levels of the segregation. So I'm going to show you that as well. I'm going to use the same segregation, uniformat code. I'm just going to delete segregation according to the building levels. So we're going to segregate all uniformat elements, but not just by the codes. We want to segregate them according to real uniformat structure. So in this case, I'm going to edit this segregation. And instead of using full uniformat code, we can use the substring option. So in this case, we can use the same property several times for different ways of segregation. So in this case, I'm going to use only first letter of the uniformat code for the first level of segregation. So this is the starting position, the first position of the value of the uniformat, and the length which we want to use is just one. It's basically in the first letter. And I'm going to hit OK. So this is the first level of segregation according to uniformat. And then I'm going to use the same uniformat property to create additional levels of segregation using substring, for example, from the second position. So starting from the second, let's say, second letter of the value of the uniformat code, and then we want to use the next two letters. So the length will be 2, starting from the second position, and then 2 next letters. Hit OK. And then for the last level of segregation, then we can use the full uniformat code. So again, I'm going to use uniformat. So these are some, I'm going to use the full uniformat without substring options. So this is uniformat, the same one, and hit OK. We can colorize the elements on the last level based on uniformat code and hit OK. So now the segregation works according to the first letter and then according to the next 2 values and then according to the uniformat code. So this is the way how you can create the segregation according to your needs using the same property in a different ways. Hopefully, and this is clear. So if it is, I'm going to present you some additional way of segregation using not just the discrete properties, but continuous property or some numerical values. So we can show all our building elements again, just to see how the colorized B-model element looks like according to uniformat codes. And then we can create new custom breakdowns from, let's say, rooms of the buildings. So in this case, I'm gonna create new custom breakdown for the rooms. So if we want to use the segregation from the specific category or the types of the elements, in this case, we can select the categories or the families from the types. I'm going to select the category and choose spaces. Spaces are actually used to segregate the rooms and the spaces which are coming from your authoring software. So all the spaces will be included and nothing else from the categories of the BIM model. So now I'm going to use the category spaces and use current selection. So we see that we have 130 available rooms. And in this way, I want to segregate the rooms according to, let's say, their name. So we can also use discrete property to filter name. And then we want to segregate all the rooms according to their area, for example, in this case. So you can use any property available from the list of continuous property, which are listed right here. So you see the volume, the perimeter, the length, and all other numerical properties. I'm going to use the area. We can filter it and then select only area. And in this case, you can use and put some, let's say, range values. So the system will show you the rooms within the predefined range. So I'm going to segregate all the rooms which have, for example, the area less than 10 square meters, between 10 and 20, from 20 to, let's say, 40 square meters, and more than 70 square meters. And now if I hit OK, you see that the breakdown creates these different ranges. And we can also colorize all these elements according to the range of these values using the set color coding rule. Or if we're using discrete properties, we can use set color coding rule continuous, which is going to create some kind of gradient colors regarding differences of the values of the area in this case. So we're going to hit OK. And now the segregation according to the rooms is created, first according to the name of the building and then according to the area of the building. You may see that we, in the view, we see all the BIM model elements and colorize the rooms. If you want to see only the elements which are included in your custom breakdown, you can use this small option right here, set only or show only colored elements. So all other elements which are not included, so all the elements which are not rooms in this case, will be excluded. So now we can see only the rooms which are colorized according to their values of area. And this is also something that could be really, really convenient and can be used for checking your properties or checking the quantities, for example, for the volumes or area of the structural elements or areas of the rooms or other spaces according to the requirements of the clients. Hopefully this is clear, and all these custom breakdowns which you create are saved. And always when you open your project, so if I save my project, next time they're going to be automatically available. And it's not just that. If you update your project, so if you close this project and update it with a new version, all these custom breakdown segregation method will be updated when you update your project. So all new BIM model elements will be included automatically. And this is really, really convenient and good feature. So if this is clear, I'm gonna skip to the explanation of the properties and the, let's say, tools and the feature available regarding the properties of your BIM model elements. So we can go back again to our common 3D view showing entire building, entire project, and we can select any of the B-model elements from the current view or from the any existing structure for the breakdown. And when you select your B-model elements, automatically you see all information for selected elements. Currently, we selected some ducts, and I'm seeing 1,452 elements selected within the uh, selection info window. And in the upper window, which is regarding properties, which showing us the properties, we see multiple elements are selected, and some of these elements do not have the same properties. So in this window, you may see all listed information, and some of the information have this warning icon. And this actually shows you that some of the selected elements do not have all the properties, or not all selected elements have the same properties. So this means that some of the elements do not have the property diameter, some of the elements do not have the height property, or some of the elements doesn't have the width property. I can isolate easily these selected elements, and we can check each of these selected elements, or for selected elements, we can use additional features. On the right click on any of these available properties, we can choose from the available options, and these are really useful. So we can select elements with this property, or we can select the elements with the value of specific property. So I can select all elements visible with this property. So now you see all these elements do have the property, and all other elements do not have the same property. And that's why we saw the warning for diameter, because only these elements are actually, let's say, cubical, and all other are actually cubical. So these are the tubes, and that's why they have diameter. All other are having the different properties. And also, if we select the width and check the elements with this property from the visible, we see that these tube elements do not have it. So this is also another way how you can expect the properties from your B model, checking the properties if elements do have specific property or do not have the property. And this way of information is quite nice to have. Also, really good feature is selecting the values of the property. So if we want to check, for example, let's say, length, property length, currently we're seeing the ducts, and this window for showing the properties is segregated also according to selected elements. So if you select multiple elements, if I select my ducts and duct fittings, within this window we can see duct fitting and duct properties, and we can expand each of these to see the properties for each type of selected elements. So in this case, if we want to see the length property and value of this property for entire project, we can easily do that just by right-clicking on selected property and using option view values of the property. So now the system will list you all available values for the length of the selected category of the elements, in this case ducts, but we can switch it and choose to select all values for the length from entire building, from entire project. So if we choose all categories, the system updates, and now you see the values for the length for entire project. And we can easily use this window to additionally filter elements we want to select. For example, if we want to select only elements which have length from, let's say, 1 to 2 meters, I can use this and select these elements and use option select. And now the system selects almost 6,000 elements, and we can easily isolate these elements. So these elements have the length between 1 and 2 meters, and you can check it for each selected elements. And this is just another way how you can use available information to get, um, let's say, specific information which are useful for your current work. Also, all information, all the properties which you usually use and which are commonly used for different kinds of projects, then we can use this option. Let me just show all the elements back again. Select any of the elements from the B model. And usually when we're checking the B model, we're usually checking the areas, volumes, and the lengths. And this is something that it's commonly done for every project, for even for the brief B model checking. We always want to know which are the areas or the quantities regarding the volumes of specific B model elements. So if we do that oftenly, we can use the option right click and add to favorites as a sum. So it means that we can use that property, which is oftenly used, for all specific elements every time when we open the project, and this one, which is added as a favorite, will be available within the tab favorite properties. So all the properties which are added as a favorites will be available within the tab favorite properties. So if I select multiple types of the elements, in this case beams and let's say structural columns and walls or structural foundations, we see available properties which are added as favorites. So in this case, we added volume, volume, and volume for all these three different types of beam model elements. So for the beam, we have the volume. For the structural columns, we also have the volume. And for the foundations, we also added volume. And in this window, in this favorite properties windows, we can see the summarized values for selected elements. So I can also easily isolate selected elements, and you can see the summarized quantities for the volume, for the beams, for the columns, for the foundations. And also, because these are different types of the elements, if you want to see the summarized, fully summarized value for the volume of all these elements together, one way how you can do it in the instant inspections without even using quantity takeoff module, which we're going to talk about in the next sessions, you can select the volumes and automatically the system will show you the summarized value in the right corner. So this is total sum for the volumes of all these selected elements. Otherwise, if you go to the properties, here you can inspect the properties for each the type or each the category, selected category from the B model. And then you can see the, let's say, volume, summarized volume for the structural columns. And we can also see the average volume for the columns. Also, I have to point out that these dimensions and all these different groups of the properties, always when you import the project from your authoring tools, these groups of the properties and the properties are automatically coming from the authoring tool. So this grouping is available from the authoring tool, or additional way how you can group the properties is if you export IFC using specific mapping options, then you can map and group your types or the groups or group of your properties according to your needs or according to specific requirements, and these will be grouped according to that. This is not something that the Bexel manager does by itself. These information are read from the available information coming from the imported BIM model. Additionally, we can add new properties and new properties groups using additional options. And also, I have to point out that calculated quantity groups, which is always available, is something that Bexel Manager does automatically. And this is something that can help you, but always, we recommend you to always use the values which are coming from the authoring tools. But sometimes if you're using some messing or some generic B-model elements, which doesn't have accurate information, in that case, if your authoring tool do not provide the quantities, in that case, you can use calculated quantities, which Bexel Manager provides you for you. But again, I have to repeat, this is something that Bexel Manager calculates from the geometry of the model. And this is something that should be used if available information from the authoring tool do not exist. So if this is clear, I'm going to show you how you can add new properties, which is really, really useful and a really convenient way of enhancing your B model coming from the authoring tool. So if you want to, let's say, edit any of the available properties, you can do that. The black properties or colorized properties which are colorized in black can be edited just by right-clicking on it and using the option edit. And if you select just specific type of the element, in this case, just the structural columns, we can edit any of these available black properties, but also we strongly recommend to not change the numerical properties and or any property which are coming from the authoring tool, only if you have to, or if the, let's say, design process is completed and you're not gonna get the updated B model, so you have to figure out how to enhance your current B model that you're inspecting. Then in that case you can change these available property, because changing these information, you are becoming responsible for these information. So in this case, we can change, let's say, this constructional sequence or the phase, which is assigned to this column. And we can change it to, let's say, phase 2 changed. So if I select the same column, you see the property value is changed. As I said, we recommend you to not do it by yourself, but if you have to, let's say, enhance your BIM project by adding some new properties, then you can use the option. Let me just bring this window a little bit smaller so you can see the option, property, new. So this is the way how you can add new properties to selected elements. So if I want to select or add the properties to my, let's say, structural beams, in this case, I can select the beams from the beam model, or I can select only, let's say, the beams from the sample model 2 or something like that. So we can use just the beams from the building 1. We can use the spatial or selection info window to do additional filtering based on, let's say, the spatial breakdown. And then from the selected elements, I can select only beams in my building 2, select the elements, and that's it. I've selected only beams in my building 2, and then I can add new properties to these beams. So we can use the option new, add new property, which in this case is going to be some new edit property. And also we can choose from the existing groups of these elements, or we can choose some of the existing, or we can create new group. So in this case, I want to use existing group identity data, for example, and add some new textual property. So in this case, I'm gonna adding property with the value 1 for all selected beams. And now when I select these beams, within the group identity data, we're gonna get new edit property with value 1. And that's not just that. All these properties, whether these are coming from the authoring tool or you added manually, can be exported into Excel files and also can be exported and imported into your authoring tool using the Excel spreadsheets, or if you're using the Revit, you can import these properties using the add-in which we developed for exporting and importing these properties. So I'm going to select all these previously selected elements. I can do that by just clicking on control button and left arrow on my keyboard, and the previous selection is selected again, and I can export the properties for selected elements. So in this case, we can export all available properties, or we can choose which of the properties we want to export. So I don't want to export all available properties. So in this case, I can just export this new edit property from the list and hit OK. So the system will create new edit Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to show you how it looks like, how this Excel spreadsheet looks like. So now we have new edit property, the unique ID for the beam elements, and now we can change these values. So I can do this, and I can automatically change the values for all these elements, save this Excel spreadsheet, and I can import these properties again. So using the option import properties from the manage properties toolbar, I can import properties. And I'm going to use the same Excel spreadsheet to add these properties. So now we can check if these properties are added as we want it to. So new edit property now has changed value. And this is the way how you can use that for enhancing the quality and information within your B model. Of course, this is not just that. So you can also use the formulas to add some additional property which are not available. So for example, if in this B model I select my railings from the B model, let me just find the railings, and I can isolate only the railings from the B model. You see that the railings, for example, have the length and have the, let's say, computation height, but these elements do not have the property area. And if we want to get the area from these elements, we can do it again using the property new option and add new property to these selected elements. So now I'm going to add property railing area within the new group of the properties. In this case, I'm going to create new group railing edit properties, and we're going to choose in this case to create area type of the property. And in this case, we can use available properties from the B model to calculate a non-existing property. So we can use the length and computation height or some other property to calculate the area, or in this case, railing height. So railing height and the length will be used to calculate the area. So in this case, we can choose the properties from the project or from the elements. So we can choose the length from selected, and then you see the expression shows you the length property, which we want to multiply with a property called railing height. and we're gonna hit OK. So now the system will automatically create new property called railing area within the new group railing edit. So if we hit OK, and now go to the new group, which will be called railing edit, we see the railing area and we see the area of these selected elements. For each of these, we can check the area, which is calculated by the Bexel manager. And of course, we can select all these elements which are currently visible in our screen and export the properties from selected elements into Excel spreadsheet again and save it. And this is the way how you can exchange this information. Of course, the best way is now, since we have the export IFC option, is if you edit some additional properties, you can export IFC files using the option to export elements to IFC. So in this case, in order to make it much faster, I can just use to export our, let's say, structural beams and structural, and these elements we added property for the railing. So I'm just gonna select the beams again. So these visible elements, just in order to make it quicker to export, we're gonna export only these elements which are currently visible to see the consistency of added properties. Before that, I'm gonna save the project and use the option export to IFC. So now the system, this is something really new and unique and really, really useful. And that's something that not a lot of BIM management platforms do not have. This is really unique and a great tool feature. So you can use the option to export IFC to X3 IFC versions or IFC 4 version. And also we can choose whether we want to export all elements from the project, or in this case, I just want to export visible elements in order to make it quicker. So this is the online education project, version 2, IFC, save it, and that's it. So when the system exports this IFC, I'm gonna open it to show you the information are also saved. So now we're gonna close the project and create a new one from the exported IFC. That's the one, hit open, and that's it. So these are exported elements. If we select any of these beams, you see all available information, and also within the identity data, we're gonna have the new edit property with these properties also for the railings. We're gonna get new property group, which is railing added with these information also saved. And also when you create your cost information and for the scheduling information, all these information are also saved if you export IFC for file formats. So before we conclude this session, I'm gonna briefly show you something that we're gonna share with all of you, hopefully within next weeks. This is the add-ins that I mentioned yesterday. We developed for our projects that we involved for checking the information for the projects. We developed some add-ins using the Open API, and we believe that these add-ins can be really, really useful to our customers. So we're gonna share these add-ins to you, and you can use them and you can customize these to check your B model. So in this case, we have some new B model, which is also created from IFC, from IFC files. Also, I forgot to mention, but this is something that is commonly done, and you can find this information within the manuals. So all these segregation elements and segregated methods, you can search specific types of the elements using the filtering option. So you can type in the name of specific elements, and then the system will filter all elements available which are in compliance with the filter. So this is something that I forgot to mention yesterday, but the point is we developed some specific add-ins for the checking of the properties of your B models. And in this case, I'm going to present you IFC model checker, which will be shared with you. So you can use predefined and Excel spreadsheets with specific rule sets and rules which are supposed to be checked. And then all these Excel spreadsheets can be adjusted, customized, so you can check your own properties for your own project. So in this case, I'm going to present you the Excel spreadsheet and how this Excel spreadsheet looks like. So here we have predefined project phases for which these specific properties and information is supposed to be checked. We have different types of B model elements or different types of IFC. And in this case, we added only architectural and structural types. So you see the sheets covering specific IFC types. And for each type, we specify properties, property group, which is supposed to be this property in. We also specified the property set, IFC value, or the type of these properties. So we specify if this property is supposed to be textual or numerical, and we specify the phase, which is the same phase used for the checking in different phases. So if you want to check your own model, you can just change these available property and customize it according to your needs, according to your BIM execution plans, or according to your client's requirements. So in this case, I'm going to import this Excel spreadsheet, which will be used to the checking. So let me just check. This is the one. Open it, and then the system will check all these information, all these properties, if they are in compliance with these rules. In the phase options, we can choose specific option, or if we choose the last one, or in use, it means that all other properties will be covered. So if you use in use option, all the properties which are supposed to be added in the previous phases will be checked if they are existing or if they are not existing in this project. So if we hit run, the system will calculate and go through entire BIM project and check and automatically create selection sets, which can be used to check and send the issues to other participants of the project. And selection set is something that we're going to cover in the next session next week. So this is just, let's say, a tip and announcement for you that you're going to get some of these add-ins that we created, so you can use them on your projects, and how these executed rule checks are actually showed in your selection set window. So after the completion, the Bexel manager automatically creates selection set with model check results with specific date and time when this is executed. And then we can check for each of these types of the elements if they are in compliance with specific rules. So we see that some of these elements do not have property, do not have other property, or specific elements have warning because they do have specific property, but for example, they do not have the value for this property. So if I go to this fire rating property for selected elements, we can find the property fire rating. And you see that the value is empty. For some other properties, you see that the elements do not have a property, or the property is not defined. So it means that they do not have specific property at all. And this is another useful way how you can use, let's say, these segregation method or the APIs or developed add-ins to check your B models. So we get to the conclusion of today's session. I'm going to try to respond to your questions. So let me check if you have some questions. Uh, what are the differences between categories and the rooms? Well, categories are different types of B-model elements, and the rooms are just specific type within that. So the rooms are specific type of the spaces, IFC space. This is the way how the Revit actually uh, handles with different types. So Revit have the spaces and the rooms, but within the IFC, these are IFC spaces, and you can additionally segregate these in a different categories. Why I cannot put some properties in my favorite properties? I'm not really sure about that, but for any property that you select for specific type of the elements. So within this case, beams, I can select ArchiCAD IFC ID and make it as a favorite. So any property can be added. If you have some issues, you can send us your project or save the images of the issue so we can try to respond to you. What are the differences between categories and the families? Aha, okay. So this is another question. Categories are the higher level of hierarchy. So these are the different IFC types and, let's say, subtypes or specific entities of IFC elements. So always you see the beams, and these are all beams in your project, but of course you have different types of the beams, and each beam have specific, um, let's say, height and width or dimensions, or your walls have specific types. The walls is a category, and each wall have specific, let's say, subtype. So you have concrete walls, partition walls, masonry walls, and so on. So these are different levels of hierarchy. Uh, if I create new property in the new group, why this new property is not showing? I'm not really sure what do you mean, but I've already presented how you create new property within the new property group. And of course, it's going to be presented. So now I'm creating AAA because in this case, AAA property and property group will be at the top of this properties information window. So I'm going to choose the text and leave it empty. So if I hit OK, it's automatically created the group and the property. Can you make search for room with the height less than specific? Yes, of course, but there's several ways how you can search specific element regarding the value. One way is, for example, using the, let's say, elements. I'm going to go back to my rooms because this is the question. So I'm going to use the, okay, I have to go to open the project. Of course, you can search your project. So let me just open this one. In the meantime, we can go stick to this one. So one way is, in this case, I can search for, let's say, my stairs. Now I selected all the stairs. I can isolate selected elements. So these are the stairs. And then we can use the option view value. And then this is the way how we can use the value of these selected. Now I'm going to use, let's say, the value for the number of threads. So now we can select only elements with specific value of the property, and this is one way. The other way, which is covered within the manuals as well, is using the option search within the Bexel manager. So I'm gonna try to find the elements. And here you can choose specific category or the type. So in this case, let me just see if the sample B model is opened. Show all. So yes, it's opened, so we can search it in this way. Select, find elements. You asked, for example, the room. So we can just select rooms, or in this case, spaces with specific property. So we can choose the specific property, for example, I don't know, height, length, whatever property you have already, and then find these area which have the equal value to or less than, let's say, 20 square meters. So this is the way how you can search these elements. Could custom properties be exported back to the authoring tool? Unfortunately, no. But every time when you update your B model, these custom breakdowns will be available. Could you please, how Bexel Manager can work with multi-layered elements, for instance, with walls? Yes. Let me or remind me to show that in the next session, because currently I do not have the BIM model with that kind of segregated BIM model elements, but it's quite similar. All these elements which are segregated into layers will be presented as parts. So all elements will be presented as parts, and you can choose and work with these parts and the layers and materials for each of these. How will the newly added properties will be exported to IFC? In which class of IFC? Well, if you're just talking about the properties will be exported in the same way as you added these properties. So you actually adding the specific property type, you're specifying, is it numerical, length, area, textual, or different types of the properties. So these are going to be mapped according to that automatically. And hopefully in the future, we're going to expose that mapping, let's say, options. So you'll be able to change your mapping options in the export. Currently, it's added or exported automatically. Is it possible to calculate the formwork area from beam and column with the same way? Yes, of course, if you have some specific properties that you can use, for example, perimeter and height, you can calculate formwork. Or even if you do not have some properties, you can add some formulas, custom formulas, so you can customize and calculate your own properties. Yes, I've already showed how these added properties are exported into IFC. I think it's clear. Is it possible to reorganize or remap the structure of the properties group? Currently, you can only create your new groups, and this is something that is coming from the authoring tool or coming from the IFC files, so it's not currently possible to reorganize it. And this is something that is maybe not really let's say, recommended to do, because sometimes according to BIM execution plans, you specifically want to put specific property into specific group. What do you use to base to create the categorize the different parameters into my model? I'm not really sure what do you mean, but you can use the automatically created segregation method, or you can use your own custom breakdowns. Will you please explain some other benefits or applications of custom breakdowns? Well, I think it's quite clear. I mean, this is the really good way how you can segregate the elements according to any property that you want. So you can use any available property coming from your B model and segregate your B models according to that. So it's really convenient, and it allows you flexibility to organize your B model elements in the way you like. And as I've said, after the update of the B model, everything is also updated, so you can always use your custom breakdowns for some kind of B model checking, and also for some kind of automatic grouping of the B model elements according to the properties. Any such example available using project like roads, tunnels instead of buildings? Currently, I mean, according to the IFC standards, every building or every project is automatically segregated according to the site, and then building, and then according to building levels. So if you have your, let's say, tunnel projects, and hopefully remind me to that, I'll try to show you that in the next presentation. Even if you have your tunnel, you're always going to get the building one, because it's something that is standardized, and you can always rename that segregation method or this building into your building name, which is called tunnel or the road, instead of using the option, let's say, building. So if you work with the roads or the tunnels, you can edit spatial structure and rename this building into, let's say, tunnel. So in this way, entire building and all the elements will be renamed. Why, the next question, why publish Revit model to BX3 and I open it to Bexel Manager, do not show uniformat, master format, and custom sequence? Because you do not enter these properties within your Revit model. So this sample model is created in Revit, but in Revit, we added some additional properties or the attributes, and then these properties are exported. So if you want to get uniformat or master format or any other additional property, you have to specify that in your authoring tool. Can be composite elements divided into parts? Yes, but you have to do that in the authoring tool. So if you export your let's say Revit model, you have to create or convert the elements into parts before the exporting. Or if you exporting Tekla, IFC, Tekla, ArchiCAD, Allplan, or any other authoring software into IFC, then before the exporting that into IFC, you have to set your exporting options to segregate these elements into layers. I think that was it. Hopefully I answered the most of the questions. And if you do not have any more questions, thank you very much for your attendance, and see you next week. Thank you again. Bye-bye.